like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Revolutionising Quality Monitoring with Interaction Analytics. So I'd like to introduce you to our main speaker for today, which is Sean Murphy from Genesis. Sean, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Sean Murphy, and I head up product marketing at Genesis for our interaction analytics, and interaction analytics, as I'll be talking about today, includes both speech analytics as well as text analytics. And I also lead our product marketing for our interaction recording and quality management suite of products as well. And I've been with Genesis for nearly 4 years now, and before that I was actually working with a company called Utopia, which was acquired by Genesis about 4 years ago, a little less than 4 years ago. And Utopia was focused on interaction analytics, primarily on speech analytics. And I was with Utopia for about 4.5 years before the acquisition by Genesis. So I've been working with speech analytics for over 8 years now.
Excellent. And a little bit of housekeeping, just like to run through before we get going. That is that you can watch a replay of today, and it's callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. There is a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates for the best tip or question that we have from the audience today, and you can leave those in our chat room, callcenterhelper.com/chat. Here's the address here, and there's an added advantage of being logged into the chat room that you can download the webinar slides from the chat room. We're having a discussion currently in the chat room, and that is, in 1 or 2 words, how would you best describe your quality monitoring process? So, for instance, good, inconsistent, needs calibration. Let's have a look at the some of the responses. We've got it needs upscaling. Costa says it's very manual in his contact center. Edward says it's very neat and also needs calibrating. Hannah says it's manual and very subjective. We've got a few others, manual and not considered as a priority by someone. I'm a bit surprised with that one. We have another comment. We have a great call quality team. However, we struggle to maintain regular checks with our rapidly growing team in the organization. Letitia says it needs calibrating. We've also got excessive and timely. Natalia says it needs calibration. And Elise also says it needs calibration. So, Sean, there's quite a range of different responses there.
Yeah, very interesting. And we'll be talking a lot more about some of the challenges that people experience with their quality management programs in the presentation today. But an interesting range of responses there.
Yeah, and certainly I think the calibration and some of the manual is certainly an area where the automating with analytics may be able to help. At which point, it's probably an ideal opportunity to pass the baton across to you, Sean, and let you take you through your thoughts on how we can use analytics in improving quality.
Excellent. All right.
Perhaps you'd just like to share your slides on the screen there.
Yeah.
There we are.
All right.
Just need to go full screen.
Just go full screen on that.
There we are.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that excellent introduction. So our agenda for today was to begin by talking about the significant opportunities hidden within the multitude of conversations handled by your contact centers on a daily basis. And then we will go on to talk about the problems with traditional quality management processes and solutions. And then I'll talk about some of the key capabilities of an interaction analytics solution. And again, when I say interaction analytics, I mean speech analytics and text analytics, and hopefully the combination of those two technology solutions. And then we'll talk about some best practices for analytics-driven quality management. And then I do have a few case studies at the end where we can talk about the success stories of customers who have implemented interaction analytics to help drive and automate their quality management processes. And of course, we'll leave plenty of time to answer any questions you might have along the way. So with that, let's jump right into it. Significant opportunities are hidden within the multitude of conversations handled by your contact centers on a daily basis. Opportunities to increase revenue, reduce costs, and improve the customer experience. Unfortunately, with traditional quality monitoring and other types of contact center monitoring processes, it's very difficult to understand and therefore to leverage those opportunities that are hidden within those conversations. So let's talk a little bit more about what types of opportunities are hidden within conversations. Some examples here. For example, if the customer says when they call in, "I called you yesterday," obviously that indicates that there was no first contact resolution on the call when they called yesterday. And if the customer says, "I'm really unhappy with the service I'm getting from your company," that indicates that the customer is rather likely to churn, to leave your company for one of your competitors. And then finally, if the customer calls in saying something along the lines of, "I have a question about the delivery of my package, but I also want to know something about another product," that indicates that that customer actually has multiple reasons to be calling your organization today. However, with traditional call dispositioning systems, nearly all call dispositioning systems and processes today only allow for a single call reason. That's whereas it's quite common for all of us as consumers to actually, when you get a human on the line, you want to ask all questions that you might have for that company. So it's quite common to actually have multiple call reasons during a single call. And again, traditional sort of call disposition systems just simply don't allow for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, you also get, I guess, the problem of where it doesn't fit within one of the categories, and that's one of the challenges that you can. I think one contact center I saw had 720 call dispositions, but of course no one could ever remember what they were. So the best ones are where there's only, say, less than 20, and you sort of almost number them so you can put them, speed dial them in. But again, yeah, you're absolutely right. It does tend to only allow for one reason, which isn't always the case.
Yeah, right. And you're absolutely right as well that it works best if there's only a smaller number of possible candidates. But unfortunately, that means that you do have to sort of stereotype, so to speak, the call reason as well, which makes it unintentionally sort of makes it more generic than it probably needs to be for highly accurate measurement and improvement of performance. So at this point, we thought it would be good to ask a poll question, and I think, Conti, you'll go ahead and administer that question, right? Yeah.
Indeed. So here's the poll question. Approximately what percentage of the interactions that your contact center handles are valued for quality purposes? So this could be the number of calls you look at, but also can also include the number of emails or web chats. So would you say it's less than 1% of interactions, between 1 and 2%, between 2 and 5%, 5 to 10%, or 11% or more. So if you'd just like to vote on that. Sean, where do you think the most common answer is likely to lie?
I would wager that certainly below 5% would be the average. Unfortunately, possibly even lower than that. And the reasons for that I'll talk a lot more about in a moment. So I don't want to influence the results here too much.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the number of results. The sample size here is 95 people. So 36% of most common is less than 1% of interactions are monitored. 33% say it's between 1 and 2%, 14% between 2 and 5%, and only 9% say that it's actually more than 10% of interactions. So we are looking at relatively small sample sizes within the organization. And I guess if I evaluate it for quality, and you're only looking at less than 1% of my interactions, there's a good chance that may be a bit hit or miss.
Absolutely, yeah. Unfortunately, it's just very difficult to understand those conversations and to understand agent performance with you're sampling that small a size of conversations.
Well, I think there's probably a technological answer for this that you're going to be sharing with us, Sean. So would you like to carry on with the presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'll begin to I'll start by addressing why that's the case. Because so as we just discussed, the main problem with traditional quality management is that it does provide extremely limited visibility into contact center conversations. And that's primarily because the process is so manual and labor intensive. It consists primarily of having supervisors or coaches or potentially even managers manually listen to calls and score those calls according to quality criteria. And because the process is so labor intensive, it's very expensive. And for that reason, it's only feasible for most organizations to review 2% or less of calls that are randomly selected. In fact, as we just saw, the average is probably even lower than 2%, unfortunately. Might even be around 1%. Furthermore, other channels of contact, such as chat sessions or emails, are generally handled by separate applications and monitored separately, and often even less frequently than calls. So overall, it's a situation of extremely limited visibility into the content of those conversations.
And I think that's almost missing a trick there on certain things like web chat and email, because with human speech, it's very easy to, if there's a misunderstanding, you can sort it out very quickly by just saying, "Sorry, I didn't understand that." Whereas on web chat, it's very easy to, perhaps cause offense to someone by typing or using capitals or something like that, which is even more difficult to see. And once that starts to embed, can be quite difficult to spot the emotion, if you like.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, that's a great point. And another challenge with the traditional quality management process is that in those evaluation forms, it's quite typical to use rather subjective evaluation criteria. And such subjective evaluation criteria, unfortunately, leads to disagreements about the results of evaluations among both evaluators and agents, and makes truly objective measurement very difficult. Typically, quality evaluation criteria are vaguely defined. often have sort of multi-dimensional aspects. You know, many dimensions are embedded within a single question, so to speak, and they're not linked directly to agent behaviors. I have a couple of examples of sort of traditional evaluation form questions here at the bottom. And they tend to be questions such as these. You know, did the agent maintain a friendly and helpful tone throughout the call? Well, what exactly is the definition of a friendly and helpful tone? Obviously, that's up to the ear of the beholder, so to speak. It's a very subjective kind of criteria because each person has their own opinion of what exactly a friendly and helpful tone will sound like. Similarly, the question, did the agent stay focused and attentive to the customer? Well, attentive to the customer, you might be able to hear that kind of thing, but focused, that's really difficult to objectively measure, right? So, and again, this is a multi-dimensional type of question because really focused and attentive, although similar, they're slightly different things, right? So again, very subjective and will often lead to disagreements about the results of evaluations. So the solution to both of these, to all of these challenges, I would argue, is interaction analytics and automating the quality management process, the quality monitoring process, using interaction analytics. Interaction analytics holds the potential to help you increase your revenue, reduce your costs, and improve the customer experience by understanding the true meaning of all the conversations handled by your contact centers. And some of our customers, by implementing interaction analytics to drive their quality management processes, have experienced a reduction in average handle time of 11%, increases in sales conversion of 29% or more, and customer satisfaction improvements in the realm of 23%. And I'll talk more about the details of some of these success stories at the end of the presentation. But first, I thought it would be important to discuss some of the key capabilities of an interaction analytics solution. The first, I would say, is the ability to analyze all conversations across all channels of contact in exactly the same way using a single application. Because, as we were discussing just a moment ago, particularly these days, obviously there's a lot more sort of digital interactions, such as chat sessions and emails, etc. And as we mentioned, usually today those are handled by separate systems and teams, and often monitored using very different methodologies and very different processes. That makes it impossible to understand trends that are emerging across all types of conversations handled by the contact center. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But secondly, the second key capability is the highly reliable identification of predefined topics for categorization of contact reasons, because that's what really helps you to automate the quality management process. Because you'll need to be able to correlate the contact reason with the key performance indicator that's most important to your business, and you really need to be able to categorize contact reasons as a prerequisite to automating quality management. And then thirdly, the ability to automatically discover emerging trends and unexpected events that aren't predefined by users. as we all know, the nature of business today, and really has always been, that we simply don't know what we don't know, so to speak. There will always be unexpected events in a dynamic business environment, and trends that emerge. So your business users won't necessarily know what to expect, everything to expect, and everything to search for. So you need to have a solution that will automatically discover those types of unexpected events and trends that are emerging without your users telling the solution to search for that event or trend. So in terms of the first key capability I mentioned there, usually speech analytics and text analytics are two separate and distinct applications. Unfortunately, when text interactions such as chat sessions or emails are analyzed separately from calls, it's nearly impossible to detect trends that are occurring across all conversations. It's really crucial to be able to analyze all conversations across all channels in exactly the same way, using a single application. Because again, that helps you to detect trends that are emerging across all of those conversations, as well as unexpected events, and to be able to head off any sort of business process issues that are occurring across all conversations, etc. It's a very important capability. Now, for the other the other key capabilities I mentioned, I think it's important to first talk about how interaction analytics extracts business value from conversations. Because I'd argue that interaction analytics delivers business value, business results in three primary ways. And I have these, on this slide, I have these sort of prioritized in terms of the business value that they deliver. The first, which I would argue delivers the most business value, is categorizing conversations according to every topic discussed within the conversation. Because as I mentioned just a moment ago, once you've categorized conversations according to the topics discussed within the conversation, you can then correlate those topics against your organization's key performance indicators to uncover the root cause of any performance issues. And that's why I'd argue that the categorization really delivers the most business value from interaction analytics. Secondly, the ability to automatically discover emerging trends or unexpected events. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, it's impossible to be able to predict every trend that will emerge in business today, and certainly impossible to predict all unexpected events. So it's really crucial to have an interaction analytics solution that can automatically discover those events and trends. And finally, the ability to search for words or phrases within interactions. Certainly also an important capability, but again, I would argue that it's the third most important capability in terms of delivering business value. And this is important to keep in mind when we talk about the types of technologies available for speech analytics today, which I'll do on the next slide here, because there are a few different technologies available for speech analytics today, but each of them has advantages and disadvantages for delivering those particular use cases for interaction analytics. The first speech analytics technology is called phonetics. It's the process of converting speech into phonemes, which are the smallest unit of human language. A phonetic index is then created, and users can search within that phonetic index for words or potentially even phrases. And phonetics does work quite well for searching for rare occurrences within large volumes of audio. Unfortunately, however, phonemes by themselves are actually meaningless because they're just small, the smallest unit of human language. So in order to even find a word, multiple phonemes need to be joined together, which means for those more technical folks, that actually means multiple queries being executed and joined together to form a single word. And the process is just not very reliable. A lot of information is just lost in that process. Furthermore, again, because phonemes are individually meaningless, the user does always need to tell a phonetic engine what to search for, because otherwise the phonemes by themselves are meaningless. So it's impossible for a purely phonetics engine to automatically discover words or anything else because of the nature of phonemes being meaningless. The second approach is called speech to text. It's also known as LVCSR. It's the process of transcribing speech into text and creating a transcription from that speech. And because the unit of recognition in the case of speech to text is entire words, it is more accurate and complete than a purely phonetics engine. It is a bit more hardware intensive, certainly. It takes a bit more processing power, and it does require a dictionary in that particular language. But the output, the transcript output, is text, obviously, which means that transcript can then be used for text analytics purposes. And text analytics, well, basically speech-to-text transcriptions are required in order to be able to automatically discover emerging trends or unexpected events within calls, because text analytics will run on those transcripts and automatically discover those types of emerging trends or unexpected events. Furthermore, having a text transcript with text analytics running against it enables you to analyze calls in exactly the same way that you'd analyze text interactions such as chat sessions or emails. So speech-to-text transcription is also important to being able to analyze all conversations across all channels of contact in the same way. Now, the third approach to speech analytics is called speech-to-phrase recognition. It's the process of directly recognizing entire phrases within the call audio itself without first converting that audio into text or phonemes. And speech-to-phrase recognition, because it recognizes entire phrases as opposed to individual words or phonemes, is by far the best method of categorization of the topics discussed within a conversation, because topics really need to be defined according to the phrases used when discussing that topic. Words by themselves, of course, an individual word can be used in many different ways to have many different meanings. You really need the context of an entire phrase in order to truly define a topic. So for that reason, speech-to-phrase recognition is by far the most accurate and complete method of speech categorization available today. And And the majority of speech analytics vendors today use either phonetics or speech-to-text transcription, or today many vendors use a combination of those two approaches, phonetics and speech-to-text. Genesis, however, is the only vendor to offer speech-to-phrase recognition, because we do hold a patent on that approach. And in addition, we also simultaneously transcribe 100% of calls into text using our speech-to-text engine. And that's also a bit of a difference from most speech-to-text vendors, because most speech analytics products which offer speech-to-text transcription will only transcribe around 25% or so of calls into text due to scalability limitations. Unfortunately, if you're only transcribing 25% of calls into text, you might be missing 75% of emerging trends or unexpected events, and that means that you can only analyze 25% of calls in the same way that you analyze your chat sessions or emails, for example. You'll be missing the other 75%. So it's definitely a disadvantage if you're not transcribing 100% of calls into text. So now let's switch gears a bit and
before we go into that, Sean, we're going to jump now to take a few questions and tips from the audience. I think it's a good point to have a bit of a break. So we'll just pass the baton across to Rachel, who's been monitoring the chat room for all of the feedback from the audience. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, the chat room's very busy at the moment, so hopefully we'll get to a lot of people's questions. Can you see my screen?
We can indeed, yeah.
Fab. So we've got first question sent in by Zoe, which she's asked, does interaction analytics still require call listening, and what reporting comes off the back of it? Sean, I don't know whether you have an answer for her.
Yeah, sure. So, yes, we certainly do still recommend call listening when you have speech analytics, for example. But the advantage is that those calls that are listened to can be highly targeted. So in other words, the supervisor or whoever that it might be can say, well, that he or she only wants to listen to the calls that have customer dissatisfaction and were about a particular topic from a particular agent, and then the speech analytics system can deliver only those types of calls to the supervisor to listen to. And that's in sharp contrast to the sort of traditional process where the supervisor has to hunt for those types of calls by manually listening to those calls and searching for calls that meet those types of criteria. Now, the reporting that comes off the back of it, that we could spend quite a bit of time talking about, because there is extensive reporting that comes off the back of it. But perhaps I shouldn't get into too much detail about all those report opportunities. I do have a few screenshots, actually, in the next section of my presentation that will give a bit more detail about the types of reports.
Great. We've had one sent in by Abigail, who's asked which tools are being used to evaluate quality of service. I don't know if our panel has any sort of answers to that.
Well, so in sort of the traditional quality monitoring process, you'll often have sort of traditional quality management tools, which generally consist of the ability to build forms and then to have evaluators listen to calls and score those calls according to those quality criteria. So that's the most common types of tools being used today. But certainly, as we're discussing today, interaction analytics can also be used to evaluate quality of service, and its use is definitely increasing quite rapidly these days to evaluate quality of service. Dante, you have any other thoughts about that one?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be anything from spreadsheets and call recording right the way up to sort of online databases, right the way through to analytics type solutions, which I would say would be at the top end of the scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
Verena sent in an email. It was a specific Genesis one. Is the software easily adaptable to new campaigns by the end user, or does it have to be done by Genesis?
Right. Yeah, it is quite easily adaptable to new campaigns. Certainly, there's as with any software, there's a bit of a learning curve, but our team, as part of any deployment, we do provide training as to how to do that, so that you can do that yourself, or the end user, sorry, can do that on his or her own.
Yeah, I think it's true to say this is sort of technology that isn't just like a box that you plug in and it makes everything better. It is something that does require a lot of interaction with to sort of fine tune to get the best results, because no two types of calls are exactly the same. So you need to work out on how you want to categorize and sort of words you want to look for and so on.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that. Actually, we've had another one sent in by her. She's asked, how reliable is the quality of the transcripts when speakers use slang or dialect?
Yeah, that's a great question. The reliability, the quality of the transcripts has certainly improved dramatically over the last few years. Certainly, in the time that I've been working with speech analytics, it's been quite amazing the amount of improvement in the transcript quality. Nonetheless, to be perfectly honest, it's always a challenge, particularly different dialects and slang. It's never perfect. I have to be perfectly honest about that. And that's actually part of the reason why Genesis, for example, does offer two types of speech analytics engines, not just the speech-to-text transcription, but also the speech-to-phrase recognition. Because if there is slang, for example, that's very commonly used by your customers, you can put that in as a phrase, and then it will recognize those phrases highly reliably. When the transcription sort of out of the box may not necessarily recognize all those slang words or dialects, or also, there's going to be words that are unique to your business, product names, or other things that won't be in the sort of out of the box dictionary. Those words can also be added to, so to speak, added to the dictionary in a relatively user-friendly way, sort of typing them into to our tool for adding to the dictionary.
Well, I think that one of the big differences, unlike other types of, if you like, speech recognition type systems, which are used live on a phone call, is if you get kind of a word wrong, this is one where it's not affecting the customer. It's only affecting the quality monitoring evaluator, which I think where there's still you still listen to the process and you say, okay, that one may not be right. Let's go off to the next example. So it's sort of less customer affecting in terms of its coverage. What's the next question, Rachel?
Yeah, we've had one sent in by Letitia, who asks, how does everyone carry out their calibration sessions to ensure marketing is fair and consistent?
That's probably a good one to ask of the audience.
Okay. Well, keep an eye out for that one. We've been asked, how many quality monitoring contacts do people mark for your contact centres?
This is actually, I combined two questions together from the audience here. So.
Yeah, so...
that was the first question. The second one was, what would be the appropriate quality compliance monitoring team for a company with around 100 agents taking calls? How do you propose to expand the team in line with company expansion?
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, multiple topics there. So the first one actually, I think, was addressed with our initial poll question there about how many quality monitoring contacts do most organizations mark for contact centers, and it seemed like the majority of respondents said that they were evaluating less than 2% of calls, right, Jonty?
Yeah, that's right.
Around 6% were evaluating less than 2% of calls, I believe. Now, the appropriate quality monitoring team size is always debatable, sort of. I guess it really depends on the business objectives that you're trying to achieve, and you know, the complexities of your particular business situation. Because
as a rule of thumb for stuff I've seen, and Sean, I don't know if you'd agree with this, it tends to be I'd say an industry average of 1 in 50, so one quality monitoring person for every 50 people. And with that, you'd probably be able to score between 4, 8, maybe 10 calls or contacts per agent per month with that sort of time. Does that feel like a right sort of figure to you, Sean?
Yeah, that does sound about right to me. Yeah.
So how would you expand that team? Add another 50 agents, you add another quality monitoring person.
Right.
Broadly speaking, I think with some of the technologies Sean's talking about, you have potentially the ability to have fewer quality monitoring people as the team grows.
Right, but also the ability to sort of use those people for higher value activities, so to speak, rather than spending their time manually listening to calls. They can be spending their time thinking about how to improve the contact center performance, or how to better improve the customer experience, for example.
Okay, so I think we've got one question. Letitia's asked, what is the best questions to ask to measure customer satisfaction?
I think that's probably a good one to ask the audience. So if you've got any comments on that, if you'd like to enter that into the chat room, which is the link at the bottom there, callcenterhelper.com/chat. Have we got any tips from the audience?
Yeah, we've actually, Letitia's provided a tip, obviously eager to win the bottle of champagne. When giving agents bonuses based on quality assurance, we have sessions with agents and provide guidelines and allow them to score a call so they understand what we expect, which I think is really nice.
Yeah, I think that's a nice tip there. Well, probably appropriate there to jump back to, because I think you had some best practice examples, Sean. If you'd like to share those with our audience. Rachel, thank you for those questions.
Not a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right. Hopefully everyone's seeing my screen again now.
We can indeed.
Right. So let's talk about some of those best practices for analytics-driven quality management. The first step I would propose, the first sort of best practice for analytics-driven quality management, is to begin by defining all quality criteria and conversation topics as phrases. Because as I mentioned earlier, phrases are really crucial to having the full context of defining a topic. Because again, words alone are insufficient. Words can be used in many different ways for many different meanings. So for example, when measuring agent performance and required sort of customer greetings, for example, you could define the greeting as when the agent says phrases such as, "Thank you for calling. How may I help you?" In exactly the same way, you can define every reason, every contact reason that a customer might be calling about in your particular business. So, for example, an airline might have people calling about air travel, and the air travel topic could be defined when the customer says phrases such as, "I'd like to reserve a flight," or when the agent says, "For each additional checked bag, there will be such and such a charge." In the same way, for a billing issue, that would be defined when the customer says phrases such as, "I have a question about my bill," etc. Once you have all those, the quality criteria and conversation topics defined as phrases, you can then use those topics to automatically evaluate 100% of your interactions to detect those phrases. In that way, comprehensively categorizing all 100% of your interactions, which then leads you to step 3, which is measuring agent performance according to those topics, so that you can correlate each individual topic at the individual agent level against your organization's key performance indicators and measure things like call duration at the individual topic level for each agent in order to be able to precisely target your training, coaching, and e-learning accordingly. Because that's how you'll discover which specific topics each agent might need some additional coaching or training on. And the
basis behind this presumably is that if an average handling time on a particular topic seems rather long, that may be that the agent is unsure of it, having to put the caller on hold, having to go off and ask for additional help, and may require some additional coaching on, or some actually training on that particular product area, or how to deal with that query.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yes.
Oh, cool.
And if that same issue is occurring for all agents, then there might even be a sort of higher level business process issue. Maybe too many steps are being required as part of the process, for example, which is requiring that agents take longer to handle the call. So that can also be rectified, be discovered through this same type of process. Right. So now I do have a couple of case studies that we can discuss as well. The first is from iiNet, which is a customer of ours down in Australia. They're the second largest internet service provider in Australia. And they were having a challenge that's quite common, as we discussed in the beginning. Their quality management team was only manually sampling less than 1% of the interactions that they handled on a daily basis. Yet their other contact center systems and processes were quite robust. So they were very well able to understand the who, the what, the where, and the when of every conversation, but not the why. In other words, not why the customer was calling, not why average handle times were high, etc. And they were experiencing, unfortunately, high average handle times. So they, as a solution, they implemented speech analytics to begin monitoring 100% of the calls that they handled. And that enabled them to transition their quality monitoring team from random sampling to selective reviewing of what are automatically flagged as important interactions to evaluate further. And it also, the solution also automatically identifies issues, helping them to provide that targeted agent training and coaching that we just spoke about. As a result, just 2 weeks after training their pilot group of agents, they experienced a 4.4% reduction in average handle time, and their business case objective was 3% reduction. So they, just 2 weeks after training their pilot group, they had already exceeded their business case. And then once they rolled it out to all of their customer support call centers, they experienced a 7% reduction in average handle time, which equates to a savings of nearly $3 million US, or 2,271,325 British pounds. Because, as Matthew Toohey, the Chief Information Officer of iiNet, said, every extra second we spend on the phone costs us money. So speech analytics starts exponentially saving us money. Another case study is that of an inside sales organization by the name of Neutron Industries. Neutron Industries is the inside sales organization for State Chemical here in the U.S. State Chemical provides high-quality cleaning and maintenance solutions. And similarly, Neutron Industries found it impossible to evaluate more than 2% of randomly selected calls. In fact, they had their sales managers evaluating calls, and needless to say, their sales managers had better things to be doing than spending their entire day evaluating calls. So it was impossible for them to evaluate more than 2% of their calls. In fact, it was probably more around 1%. And they were also unable, of course, to systematically assess and improve their agent performance. And they were experiencing poor sales conversion rates. So they began monitoring 100% of their calls with speech analytics. And as a result, they quickly doubled their email acquisition rate from 40% up to 80%. Their email acquisition rate is just when their agents ask their customers or prospects for the customer or prospect's email address. And it's something that they trained all their agents to do, but without that targeted training and coaching provided by the interaction analytics, it was hard to get the agents to do that. They also quickly increased their sales conversion rate by 29%, and their featured product sales by 37%. As a result, they boosted their annual revenue by over $500,000 per year, and just under £500,000 pounds total, which equates to $7,200 US and 5,451 pounds per agent per year increased revenue. Now, the third and final case study I have here is from a debt collection organization called HRRG. They are the collection organization for Team Health, which is which is a very large provider of outsourced medical services here in the U.S., such as physicians and other types of medical services. And here in the U.S., collections agencies are legally required to introduce calls to a debtor with what's called a mini Miranda statement. The mini Miranda statement just means that they have to inform the caller that they're calling in an attempt to collect a debt, and any information they obtain through the call will be used for that purpose. Unfortunately, as is quite common, as we've discussed, their traditional quality process was only able to evaluate around 1% of their calls, which made it really impossible for them to effectively monitor their agent performance, and very difficult to identify which agent skills were critical for successful collections. And on average, across their 2 contact centers, only 17% of their agents were complying with the mini-Miranda legislation, and 83% were out of compliance. My next slide here illustrates how their compliance was looking before they implemented speech analytics. In Florida and California, as I mentioned, only 17% of their agents were likely in compliance, while 83% were out of compliance. So when they began deploying speech analytics, they brought all their agents into a meeting and showed them this report and told them that they were implementing a solution which would be able to monitor agent compliance on every single call in order to help improve this performance. And just partially by informing their agents of the fact that every call would now be monitored for quality monitoring purposes, just 2 months after deploying speech analytics, their performance improved dramatically. You can see on this next.
So maybe the answer is you don't need a speech analytics solution, you just need to tell your agents that you have one, and performance would go up.
That's right. It helps dramatically because what's not measured cannot be managed, right?
Indeed.
and people know that they're being monitored and measured. The performance will improve.
We're running a little bit short of time, so perhaps if you'd like to jump to your final slide, and then we can take a couple of questions from the audience. I think you've got a quote from Donna Fluss that I think you were intending to end with.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the final point on the HRRG study, that it did increase their revenue collected by 20% as a result of implementing speech analytics, while also improving their compliance up to nearly 99%. So yeah, so the sort of summary here is a statement from Donna Fluss, who's the president of DMG Consulting, basically saying that that injecting analytics into the quality process yields a range of benefits, most of which we've already discussed here today, but importantly, it really allows companies to cost-effectively evaluate 100% of interactions, which helps to dramatically improve performance and automates the process of identifying trends and opportunities.
Wonderful. Well, so thank you very much for that, Sean. We've got some questions now that are we've got from the audience. I think we'd like to cover. So we're just going to pass the baton across to Rachel. And Rachel, so what are we'll just take a couple of quick questions.
Yeah, we've had one in asking what developments have been made in automatically identifying a response that demonstrates empathy within a call, and has any progress been made in quantifying it? Sean?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The way we assess that is again defining what exactly empathy means according to the phrases that the agent might use when demonstrating empathy. And then those phrases can be automatically detected within every conversation that agent handles. And they can be measured, and therefore empathy can be measured much more accurately and quantified much more accurately, because otherwise, again, empathy in particular is a very subjective term that it really depends on who is interpreting that term, whereas when you define it as phrases, it can be measured much more objectively by interaction analytics.
Yeah, so I guess it's spotting words like understand, review, how do you feel, those types of words that would be easy to spot within that context.
Yeah, absolutely.
Natalia asked, do you know any web resources or books or whatever about quality assurance? I know a few people on the chat room provided some suggestions of Amazon and things like that, but I don't know whether either of our panelists know anything.
I have one rather biased suggestion, which is go to callcenterhelper.com and type the word quality into the search box, and you get a whole range of articles such as 30 tips to improve your call quality monitoring, 59 tips to improve quality monitoring and performance, right down to how to structure a quality coaching session. So, but if anyone else has any other tips, be fascinated to hear that. Rach, what's the next question?
Yeah, Verena's asked which languages are supported by Interaction Analytics.
Right. So always an important question. So at least in the case of Genesis Interaction Analytics, we support all the sort of most common spoken languages today, such as English, of course, and all its different dialects, including U.S. English, which I speak, and as well as UK English and Australian English, South African English, also German, French, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, and its dialects, including Latin American Spanish, as well as Spanish from Spain, Catalan, Arabic, Japanese, Mandarin, Korean, and there might be a couple of others that I'm forgetting there.
Thank you. I think, Jonty, are we down to our last question?
I think it looks like it, yeah.
Yeah. Is the customer outcome becoming more important than process adherence? Sure.
Yes, I would say that it is. Certainly, process adherence is important, but particularly today, in this day and age, the customer experience in particular is extremely important, and other outcomes as well, I would say, are actually becoming more important. Would you agree, Jonty?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly the analytics helps in doing process adherence, particularly if there's certain phrases that you have to say to a customer. But I think certainly customer outcomes are becoming much more important. We're seeing quite dramatic trends happening in people throwing out average handling time as an agent target measure. That seems to be went from about 75% of contact centers using it to well under 50% in the last survey that I saw. So that's been dropping. And things like first contact resolution, net promoter scores, customer effort, and just even good old-fashioned customer satisfaction seem to be the metrics that people are driving, and that are using their quality systems to do that.
Great, thanks for that. Jonty, over to you.
Yeah, well, we've reached the top of the hour, so I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today on the call. But before we part, just like to ask the question about what did you like best about the webinar. If you'd just like to chuck that into the chat room. You can see a replay of the webinar, callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. And there's still time to join the other webinars in our program this year. So just like to thank our speaker, Sean Murphy. Sean, thank you for getting up so early in the morning. I think it's still only 6 o'clock in the morning in San Francisco. But I think the audience have found, certainly from the discussions on the chat room, some great insights. So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, happy to do it.
And thank you to everyone in our audience for joining us today. We'll be back in a week's time. We're going to be looking at morale and motivation and how to improve that in the contact center. So thank you, everyone, and look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.